Experian is your big financial friend, helping you explore credit card offers with confidence. Some cards are labeled no ding decline, which means if you're not approved, they won't hurt your credit scores. See Experian.com for details. Applying for cards labeled no ding decline won't hurt your credit scores if you aren't initially approved.
You don't technically need this car. You say that out loud to yourself. You say, I have no space. You say, I'm just looking. Then you click. Then you zoom in on photo number 87 and whisper, oh no. Then you text a friend, the one who always enables you. You say to yourself, this is the last one, knowing it is not. You don't need this car. But maybe, just maybe, this car needs you. Bring a trailer. It's never just a car.
Netflix has a new, monstrous story to tell. In 1950s Wisconsin, Ed Gein lived quietly on a decaying farm, hiding a house of horrors so gruesome it would redefine the American nightmare. Driven by isolation, psychosis, and an all-consuming obsession with his mother, he committed crimes that would haunt Hollywood for decades. The third and most harrowing installment of Ryan Murphy and Ian Brennan's anthology series. Watch Monster, the Ed Gein story, October 3rd, only on Netflix.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn. Welcome to our weekly episode of On This Week on How We're the Podcast, where today we continue to gather around the campfire with our woodbines and all of that and our pipes and navigate through Sunderland's days of old, where we look at what happened on this week in the history of Sunderland AFC. And today we look specifically at the 21st to the 27th of July at SAFC down the years. We might not be looking at the biggest things to happen in that time or go through all of the events that occurred because I'd get wrong of Martin, I think, for not leaving anything for next year and the year after. Some of them are going to be obscure, potentially, or some might just be downright crap. We talked about a signing, particularly in 1992 in the last episode, for everybody scratching their heads why we picked that one, but sometimes it's fun to have a look at the crap as it will. Last week we went from signing Brian Clough to signing Sean Cunnington, so that shows you the spectrum that we're covering. But it's Sunderland AFC, isn't it? So I'd like to think it's never boring. You might have already gathered, still no Martin once again, but he is likely to be back next week. He has finally finished his long holiday, busman's holiday, I think it was. So you won't have to put up with me for much longer. But luckily, we do have our usual storytellers to help us along. And first up, we have Andrew Smithson. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Chris. You okay?
Yes, I'm good. And, as we're getting into this is kind of the last week of July. We're starting to creep into some of these pre-season friendlies now after a couple of weeks of just rumours and couple of transfers.
Yeah, actual games of football, and one of the dates we're looking at. Yeah, we're going to look at a pre-season friendly at Roker. So that's exactly what you said. It's this is the time of year where we start getting excited and looking forward to going back to the match.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting in the one that you're going to do a bit of a deep dive in, actually, because I actually had I was too young. I think I must have been 1 or 2 or something at the time, but I did have the programme for this game, and I've got it buried away. So unfortunately, I'm still kind of unpacking after a move. So all my programs and Sunderland things are in boxes still, and I'm itching to find a place and I want to find a place where I can just grab them. And unfortunately, it's too packed away for me to grab. I was going to try today, but I think I need a day just to sort the garage out to get it. But it just got us excited purely because I remember I've got the image of the program in my head. But looking forward to getting into that one there, Andrew. And of course, to help us along, we also have Kelvin Beattie. Hello, Kelvin.
Good morning, lads. Good morning.
Yes, and Kelvin, where better to start than let's cover off last week, because we've had quite a bit of going back to the last episode. We've had quite a bit of response to. Not necessarily the story that we told about Brian Clough maybe signing, but what type of player he was. Because I was genuinely interested, and you told us, that you were a little bit too young, Kelvin, but all your information was secondhand, you were telling us.
Yeah. I think the thing that's caused the biggest stir is that I'd said that he wasn't particularly good in the air.
Yeah.
And I'll let you. We'll go through some of them emails. Yeah, that was you need to be careful with second-hand information,
Yeah.
don't you?
Well, this is why this is why on every podcast, Kelvin, I'm kind of sitting here like that, almost like a little kid when you're telling me about the players you saw, and I'm genuinely interested in what type of players that they were, because and I want to say thank you from the off, because we've had some fantastic feedback and kind of comments from last week's podcast, last week's On This Week, where we did talk about Brian Clough, and we've had quite a few emails come in, and I just want to read a few out. We've got one from Jim Wales to start us off with. He said, listening to the podcast about Brian Clough brought back a lot of memories. I first went to Roker Park in the early 1950s, but my dad started working abroad. I used to go to Simmonside to watch South Shields. One night I went back to Roker as a 15-year-old and saw Monty's debut and Clough get a hat-trick. I saw most of Clough's games at home, and I can say there's never been anyone like him. He wasn't very tall, but he had a good leap. He wasn't very quick, but he had great concentration and awareness, and I can't ever remember him running with the ball or dribbling. His ball control was great. If he got the ball near the goal, he tried to score, and if he got the ball in midfield, he passed first time to either wing and ran into the box. Most of his goals were from close range, but he did score great goals. In the 1970s, I worked with a lad who'd been an apprentice at Middlesbrough when Clough was in his prime, and he told many tales of conflict between Clough and teammates, particularly defenders. I remember being very upset when Clough got injured. However, now I think the biggest tragedy was not getting him as manager. Till the end, Jim Wales. That was a fantastic one. It's interesting, actually, the parallels. And we were talking last week about, we mentioned Peter Davenport signing. And it's funny because just that line, I think, where he said his ball control was great. And then he said, if he got the ball in the field, he passed first time to either wing and ran at the box. And actually, with Peter Davenport, every time the ball came in, he played a little pass.
Yeah.
Played a little pass. And I think that's what Clough, we talked about Clough loving him at Forest. And I think that was probably the reason he kept everything simple.
Yeah, that's where my head jumped to with that. That is probably why he really liked him at Forest. It sounds intriguing, doesn't it? It's great when you get this feedback from people that saw him play, isn't it? Fantastic.
Well, on the back of that, we got more feedback as well. We got one from Barry Macbeth that said, reading Jim Wales' letter about Brian Clough reminded me of the first time I saw him play for Middlesbrough against Sunderland in 1960 at Essen Park. The Sunderland keeper, Peter Wakeham, had the ball in hand and Clough was in his face and hassling him as he was allowed in those days. As a result, Wakeham dropped the ball and Cloughie tapped in for the only goal of the game. This particularly incensed Charlie Hurley, as Clough had never previously scored while playing against him. Clough was a goal machine for Sunderland, and prior to his tragic injury on Boxing Day 1962, had already scored 24 in 24 games that season. His loss from the team almost certainly cost us promotion. I remember his comeback game for the reserves against Halifax, and he scored a hat-trick. We all thought he was on his way back, but it wasn't to be. I wonder how different our club's history would have been if he'd managed Sunderland as he dearly wanted to. The reason that he was never appointed was the same as why he never managed England. The board were frightened, probably rightly, that he would end up running the whole organisation. That was from Barry Macbeth. But it's interesting, Andrew, talking to David Snowden about when he interviewed for the job. And apparently there were, that he turned up with Jimmy Adamson, or on separate days, of course, but those two interviewed for the job. And the rumours was, whether you believe it or not, because they might want, might put that rumour out just so to have a reason not to appoint Brian Clough. But they said he's potentially under the influence on the day of his interview.
That would have been a real shame if that was the case. Like you say, though, is that just a story that gets put out to kind of discredit Clough and make the board look like they're the good ones in this scenario? I certainly think there was an element of fear towards Clough from directors and board members and what have you, because he did speak his mind. And if something was... Yeah. if he saw something happening behind the scenes that wasn't proper or seemed a bit amateur, he would have pulled people up on it. And that's embarrassing. If you're a local businessman with a bit of credit in the bank, you don't want some upstart former footballer coming and showing you up.
But that tells you a lot, that the only people who weren't scared of him were people who did things in the right way and did things well.
Of course. And very often when Clough spoke out, he was bob on with what he said. But, you know, if you're used to running the show, my opinion would be I want the best manager in place regardless. But if you're used to running the show and perhaps you've got a bit of an ego, do you just want a yes man in charge?
But if you're not quite doing things in the right way and maybe having a bit, you know, backhanders or kind of not doing anything ethically well, you maybe don't want Brian Clough because he's going to call you up on it.
Very, very, very possibly. And there's the first alert for our legal team this week, Chris. That's
all ifs and buts and let's get that sentence in there. Well, we did have more. We had another one from Alan Ridgewell. He said, as a young boy in the 50s, he never missed a home match at Roker Park, always in the Roker end behind the goal. The Boxing Day match against Bury, Mum and Dad got me a seat in the clock stand as a treat. Never been in there again since that infamous day which ruined his career. Glad to get behind the goal in the Roker end in all weathers and watch my hero, King Charlie. That was from Alan Ridgewell. And the last one was from Mark McCartney. He said, and again, I think a little bit like Kelvin here, he said, my dad always said he was the best finisher he had ever seen. He also said he would never again take my mum to a match. Cloughie got injured the first and only time they went together. Cloughie, during his recovery, looked after SAFC youth team, which went on to win the FA Youth Cup. So Cloughie was already on his way to greatness. To have him as our manager would have been so special, as long as Peter Taylor came with him. That was from Mark McCartney. It was probably one of football's first managerial teams, the Brian Clough and Peter Taylor. And I think it showed a lot what Peter Taylor did, that even the great Brian Clough used to say that, you know, he might not have been half the manager if it wasn't for Peter Taylor. And actually, wasn't it, you might know this one, Kelvin, wasn't it? I think when he signed Dave Mackay at the late stage in his career, Dave Mackay says, oh, well, I can't do that job in midfield still, or something like that. And he said, no, you're not going to play in midfield because Peter Taylor, he's going to be a sweeper for us.
Yeah.
He couldn't believe it.
Yeah, he was quite sharp that way, Taylor. He did that with a number of players, like tweaked the positions that they played. But Dave Mackay was probably one of the more famous ones that he did it with. It was interesting. You almost feel like he was double teamed because Taylor changed Mackay's position and Clough slept on his couch till he signed. So he doorstepped him, didn't he? He just wouldn't go away and kept haranguing him till he signed for Derby. The other thing, you know, about Cloughie and directors and chairman, I'm trying to remember this. I'll probably get this one wrong. But Clough signed a number of players who the chairman and directors knew naught about, you know, so was Mackay one of them? I kind of have in the back of my head that he was. You know, they would find out. There's one player, I think it might have been John O'Hare.
Well, it was
training.
Wasn't it John O'Hare and Colin Todd or not?
Well, Todd signed much later than O'Hare. When he signed John O'Hare, I think John O'Hare was training and Sam Longson came onto the pitch to speak to Clough. And he says, who's that young lad there? He says, that's your latest signing. So you could see why if those tales were reverberating round boardrooms, you can see why the Sunderland board of directors might be a bit nervous about having him as a manager. What I was going to say about him allegedly arriving for the interview under the influence, I've got no memory of that being publicised at the time. I don't know whether that was something that came out later. So if the directors were looking to use that as an excuse, I cannot remember anything anything publicly. But I'm just a fan, I was just somebody that was rolling up every week and paying their money. So why would I know about that?
Well, at the risk of Brian Clough taking over this podcast as well, like he took over everything. I just want to ask you another thing just about that, because I'm not sure I've quizzed you about this, Kelvin, but I might have, I'm not sure. But that conversation with David Snowden about that appointment of Jimmy Adamson in the end, can you remember? Because again, I was reading David Snowden's book, not being around at the time, I did kind of get the impression from his book that actually at that point there wasn't a huge clamour for Clough at that point. It was kind of almost after Adamson and later that the bigger clamour for Clough happened later rather than at that appointment at that stage.
So I think there were a couple of things going on, and I cannot speak for everybody, every Sunderland fan.
On this podcast you do, Kelvin. Simple time.
Yeah, but I remember that we were reeling a bit with Stokoe. I think that genuinely was a lot of shock about what the state of play with Bob Stokoe and him resigning, and given the absolute ride that he'd had us on. I think everybody was sort of. I think a lot of people now, was one of them, was like quite shocked about where we'd ended up, and really I suppose I'm going to say in the dark a little bit, just wondering what is gonna come next. And I think there was also a feeling that the Sunderland board would never appoint Clough, that there was an element of that as well, a feeling that there was something between them and they'll probably never appoint Clough. And you have to think as well about where he was at with Derby at the time. It's very odd that, the timing of that was interesting, because Derby were flying a bit, weren't they? Was that a bit later? Have I got my dates mixed, a bit muddled there? But anyway,
I think it was a bit later, because you're talking, what, 75, something like that?
Yeah. It was a bit later. I've got that muddled. I'm thinking about a different point in time. Yeah.
It's always this, everyone goes back to this quote, Kelvin, and look, again, a last point on Clough, because in typical Clough fashion, he's taken over, but last point on that, I always hear this, and the famous quote, everyone says, I'd have walked on or crawled on broken glass to up year 19 or whatever it was to manage Sunderland. And I'm always sceptical of this, because I always think, if with the size of Brian Clough and the man he was, eventually when, those European Cups and stuff like that, if he'd wanted to, I think he could have waltzed into Sunderland at various points, if he'd really wanted to. Talking about crawling on broken glass. And I think at certain times he used that to get better contracts at, whether it was Derby or it was Nottingham Forest.
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, I think we know that his time at Sunderland as a player was the happiest time in his life. I believe that. Yeah. I think thereafter, there has been moments where he's been using the Sunderland vacancy as a little bit of leverage. And I also wonder about, he's not a stupid man, Brian Clough. He was not a stupid man. And if he was coming and taking a look, I mean, an interview works both ways, doesn't it? If he's coming and having a look and realising, not a lot of money there, I think by this point he realised in his managerial career that he was going to need some, he'll need some cash at some point to buy players. And was he ever in the situation, was there ever a point at Sunderland in the time that he was realistically being looked at, where cash was on offer? What was he being offered when he was coming for interviews?
Clough as well at that point, when Stokoe left, may not have wanted to have taken over from Stokoe, because if Clough comes in and does a bad job and gets Stokoe's team relegated, that's not going to look too clever given the fact that those two didn't get on.
Well, yeah, but then he took over from Revie after they won the league, which is
true.
And he would have. I think he would have come in and said, "Well, I'm going to do it better, regardless." I think
possibly the Don Revie issue, though, I think that might have also been a factor in why, at the time of Stokoe's departure, the clamour for Clough wasn't as big as it was later on, because he was in charge of Nottingham Forest, and I think by that point he might have got them promoted or was about to get them promoted that season. But before that, his previous two jobs were at Leeds and Brighton. They weren't successes for various reasons. So perhaps at that stage, there might have been a lot of supporters that, putting the romantic side of Clough to one side, thought Adamson was a better bet. You know, it was only towards the end of the 70s that Clough then gets the 2 European Cups. And it's at that point maybe that fans say, hey, former player, he loves it up here. We want him to take charge at Roker. So that's how I always saw the position when Adamson was eventually appointed. But as you say, Chris, a lot of this is just people posturing or looking to improve their situations at their current clubs. There's always an element of that with these stories.
Yeah, and as we say so many times on this, when we say typical Sunderland, not only the fact that we didn't appoint him, but my guess is that if we did, we would have been another Brighton on his CV. It would have just been our luck that it would have won done brilliant everywhere else except with us. But anyway, we have to move on from Brian Clough because we could spend another couple hours, no bother, on Brian Clough. So let's get into our days and let's get going. Straight off the bat, we go into July the 21st, and we're going to go straight into the one we mentioned earlier on with Andrew. So we're going to go to the 21st of July, 1984, and Sunderland have a bit of a strange pre-season friendly to mark a big announcement in the town, as it was then. And I'll hand it over to you, Andrew.
Yes, cheers, Chris. Yes, you're right. It looks a bit odd. Saturday, 21st of July, Sunderland against Nissan FC. It was earlier in the year, I believe, that it was announced that Nissan were going to be coming to Wearside. It had been a bit of a on-off story for the last couple of years. I think there was various local authorities desperate to get Nissan to come to their part of Britain. Nissan had said they wanted to set up a European base, and a few different areas were keen to get them along. Sunderland, I think it would be Sunderland Borough Council at that point, and the Tyne and Weir Development Corporation, they worked really hard, convinced Nissan that this was the place to be. And as a bit of a goodwill gesture, maybe a bit of cross-promotion, Nissan sent their football team over for a bit of a prestigious game. I have to admit, in the past, I maybe assumed that Nissan FC were just like a works team, maybe lads finishing a shift and then turning up to play for Nissan. But it wasn't like that, seemingly. Martin, who is, as you said, is on the last leg of his extensive European tour at the moment, or potentially heading home as we speak. He wrote a piece a couple of years ago on the website that's well worth digging out if you get a chance. He explained that Nissan FC were a top-flight team in Japan, and they had loads of internationals on their books. So Nissan owned the club and for sponsorship reasons had the name of the company as the name of the team, but it was a proper football team in its own right.
Yeah.
Bit of an odd one, but
yeah. I mean, I was we'll talk about. I was pretty young at the time. I'm trying to think what year it is now. 84. Yeah. So I was still in nappies at this point, but I didn't actually know that it was just bizarre. I didn't know it was on the site of Sunderland Airfield.
Yes, yeah. Well,
Didn't remember.
Sunderland Airfield, again, we always like to come up with these links. Kelvin might confirm this. Was that the site where Ian Porterfield had his road collision, I think?
I think it was close to there, yeah.
Yeah. So yes,
before the airfield was relocated to Ponteland, yeah.
Very good, Kelvin. That's sneaky, that. Yes, there was an airfield there. I think currently there is an air museum just next to Nissan as well. So I assume that's where the landing strip was or whatever. So yes, it was going to be a big change for the area, that this huge factory was going to come here. And even now in 2025, it brings a lot of investment and a lot of attention to the city. So yeah, this game was, like I say, it was a nice little PR stunt. You know, Nissan are coming to give us some jobs, and they're going to come and give our lads a game as well. It plays well in the paper, doesn't it? And it gets them associated with the region. In terms of the game itself, it was only a couple of days after pre-season had started. The players had only just come back from their holidays. We had signed Gary Bennett, Roger Wilde and Clive Walker, but none of them were cleared to play in the game. I don't think the paperwork was sorted out. Ian Atkins, who we've mentioned on this pod before, he was allowed to miss the game because his sister was getting married. Now, if you've got a relative who's a footballer, surely you arrange your wedding for middle of June just to avoid those little conflicts in the schedule. But other than that, it was a pretty strong team that Len Ashurst picked. We had Steve Berry making his first appearance for us. Now, Kelvin, you might know better, but I think Steve Berry wasn't particularly popular with the fans. Is that right? Is that fair to say?
He was, I think, a bit Marmite. He had his days, Berry, you know. He definitely had some good days and some not so good days. I think his problem was he wasn't a top flight elite player. He was a grafter.
This is what interested me, because Steve Berry had been released by Portsmouth, who were a Division 2 team at the time. We're playing in the top flight. And at this point, Steve Berry hadn't actually signed a contract with us. Technically, he was playing for us whilst on trial.
Right.
So, you know, that doesn't necessarily sound like a player who clubs are desperate to bring in. I mean, I don't want to be mean about him. I didn't see him myself. I'm only judging on what I've read other people say about him. That said, in the game, he did play really well. So maybe the fact he was on trial was a good thing, because it gave him that desire to.
He definitely had his days. He definitely, you know, he definitely had some good games, good moments for us, but not consistently, no, and top flight, no.
Yeah. Fair enough. But yes, he was in the team. We did have a couple of youngsters playing. Paul Lemon and David Corner started. John Moore and Gordon Armstrong. They were starting to get a little bit of first team exposure. But other than those players, it was a strong side. I was a bit surprised by the crowd. Were you at this game, Kelvin?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't. I was just going to say, though, that's a fruity looking team with Lemon and Berry in it. Yeah.
When I thought, I'll be talking about Nissan, Kelvin will be doing puns about so-and-so's got a good engine on him. I didn't think there was going to be a fruit and veg.
You've spoilt my line, man. I was saving that.
Oh, is that coming later, is it? I do apologise. But yeah.
What was the crowd?
It was less than 3,000.
2,779.
Yeah. Right.
But, and they said, and actually at the time they said the prices were reduced to £2 for adults and £1 for OAPs and kids. But Still a low crowd.
Well, there you go. Chris has now stolen my next line as well. So we're all nicking things off each other. Yeah, the crowd was low. I wonder though, I mean, we're talking July. The weather was apparently really nice. And I wonder if people just thought, we'll sack the game off and we'll just head down Roker Beach or something. I dare say, given the weather, heading down to the seaside was perhaps a more attractive proposition on that day. But for those who turned up, they saw a decent game. Sunderland got a pretty good run out. We won 5-2, which is always nice. You know, we always discuss how important pre-season games are, but for me, I think a win is always going to be good for confidence. Colin West got a hat-trick. Barry Venison scored. And John Moore, who I mentioned earlier, he came off the bench and scored. So that was good. If you're a young player, you want to kind of do something on that stage and get yourself in people's minds. It was Mark Proctor who was Sunderland's best player, though. He was involved in 4 of the goals. And I just think when you look at Colin West scoring a hat-trick and you look at Mark Proctor being heavily involved, come the end of the season, Sunderland are relegated. Proctor's out injured for a long time. Colin West has some sort of issue with Ashurst because famously he was left out of the Milk Cup final and then within days he's sold on. It just shows you how quickly things can change. Because if you did go to that game, you probably walk away saying, hey, Colin West, Mark Proctor, they're both on form. They're going to have big seasons for us. And then the story changes completely. Yeah, odd one, that.
Yeah. Just as a quick aside thing, you mentioned, this is not related really, but just talking about the airfield where you said Ian Porterfield's had his accident, of course, in the 70s, but it was just along from there in Washington Way where they had the car crash in 93, wasn't it? Where Derek Ferguson coming back from Middlesbrough. So
Yeah.
you mentioned there was a hat trick from Colin West, but we went behind in the game, didn't we, Andrew? But like you said, score 5 goals.
Yeah, 5 goals. Doesn't matter who you're playing or what the competition. People are going to be pretty impressed with that. But you're right. It was the Visit put themselves in the driving seat when opened the scoring in the 8th minute. A fella called Kimura apparently scored from quite a tight angle. And it was just before half-time when West got the first of his goals, lads. He scored from the penalty spot. Doctor that had been fouled in the area, the referee awarded a penalty. It was a bit of a dubious one, that. I maybe wonder if that competitive game, there might have been a bit more said about it because the Japanese players weren't convinced that it was foul. But yeah, we were given the penalty regardless. Colin West scored early on in the say. Nissan did equalise. They did make it 2-2. Hasharatani scored the goal. I think that's I practiced it. Yeah, when you're picking a subject and you get into it and you think, why have I picked this?
You're a braver man than me.
Yeah, I'm setting myself up for a fall. But it was a bit of a scramble. I think the ball rebounded off the bar and he was there to put it away. At that stage, at 2-2, Sean Elliott has had to make a professional foul to stop one of the Nissan players racing through. And again, had this been a competitive game, I think there's a suggestion that. So competitive, they were decent. But
Andrew, you're still in the data where it's like GBH for a red card, I think.
Well, all right, yeah, maybe. He hauled him down, from what I gather. It was.
You had to almost, you had to really hurt someone to get a yellow card, didn't you?
Yeah.
He says.
Well, yeah, GBH or not, Sean Elliott was a clean through on goal. It was only in the last 15 minutes that Sunderland really got to grips with it and started moving through the gear. One is a pun, Kelvin. So I'd drop that one in. West got his third. It was another header. It was Proctor who crossed the ball. Then John Moore, who, as I said, had come on from the bench. He headed in another Proctor cross. And with 7 or 8 minutes left, Paul Atkinson, who was playing on the right wing, he set up Barry Venison to round things off and make it 5-2. So a decent game by all accounts. As I say, Proctor did really well. He was our best performer. But interestingly, in papers afterwards, it was one of the Nissan players who the journalist felt was the best player, a lad called Marino, or Marine Ho, who was a Brazilian player who played for Nissan. He apparently caught the eye as well and did well. I don't know if he was an established name or what, but Nissan weren't, as I perhaps incorrectly assumed, they weren't just a works team, a bit of a kickabout. They were decent opposition and we did well to beat them in the end.
Yeah. I think it was the only player that the Sunday Sun writer might have been able to spell, to be honest. So he said he was their best player. But yeah, like you said, Nissan were one of the biggest sides in Japan at the time, and actually, again through Martin's fine work, and you can go back through the Local Report archives and have a look at Martin's on this day for this one. Martin actually did a bit of digging, and he said Nissan FC at the time, which was owned by Nissan, had changed its name to Yokohama Marinos in 1992, and it took its place in the newly formed J League at the time, which of course Barry Lineker signed into that year.
Again,
as you said, Andrew, in terms of Nissan FC not being just some five-a-side, getting the lads together after work and all that sort of stuff, coming in their overalls, and they were one of Japan's top clubs at the time, and in the program at the time there was Nissan Football Club, and they were doing a bit of a European tour, I think, because looking at Tom Cowie's comments again in the program, he said, I would like to wish the Nissan team the best of luck for today's game and the rest of their European tour. So they were playing plenty of sides. So this was a bit of a PR one, because obviously Nissan opening up in the area. And this was through Martin's on this day. So take a look back at that on the Local Report website. You can dig archives, and Martin's, if you just do a search for Nissan and on this day in Local Report, you should come up. We found out that Nissan FC at this point, which was of course owned by Nissan, it changed its name to Yokohama Marinos in 1992, and it took its place in the newly formed at the time J League, which of course Gary Lineker played in for Grampus 8. And he actually said Nissan still, and at the time of writing, which was, let me see, Martin wrote this in 2023, so this might have changed, I'm not quite sure. But as the point when Martin wrote that, he said Nissan still owned 80% of that club, and the rest of it was owned by the City Football Group, holding the rest of that shareholding, which is quite interesting. But just quickly, just last point on Nissan, because over the years, this was the start of it. So Nissan was kind of opening up the year after. So this was beginning the PR exercise, if you like, in terms of the relationship with the city, and it's kind of it's on that periphery of the city, if you like, and it's been absolutely fantastic for jobs. And it came in, obviously this was mid-80s, over the next 5, potentially 10 years, that saw certainly the shipbuilding disappear, the end of the 80s. I always remember coming along Wessington Way, Andrew, I don't know if you remember this as a kid, there was where the bridge is now, if you, on the north side, there's a hill that comes down towards the bridge, and there's a Sainsbury's there now.
yes.
Oh, my grandparents used to live over there, so maybe once every couple of weeks or whatever, used to end up coming down that hill. And when I was really young, my memory was of the big shipbuilding shed thing that was there, and there was always a ship in it when I was really young. And then by the kind of early 90s, that Nissan was almost the ropes. But again, this was the start of it. This was the PR exercise. There's no obligation for them to, but I think a lot of people might be surprised over the years that they didn't end up.
Yeah. This first point I'm going to a pure guess, but at the time, Tom Cowie's the owner of Sunderland. Now he is made his fortune in cars. The pure guess, I don't remember Cowie's ever selling Nissan cars. I don't remember a Nissan dealership. Perhaps there was some sort of conflict of interest there, maybe. I do know that when Bob Murray was in charge, there was that large wrangle over close to the Nissan factory, and Nissan were offered taking those up, but they objected strongly to Murray's plans at that point because they felt having the ground so close to their operation could hinder their delivery times and things like this. But you're right. They have such a massive part in the local culture, and Nissan's plant is synonymous with the area. It's often in the news, often in discussions with the government about investment and this, that, and the other. I think they often build some new models here. So yeah, you would have expected there to perhaps been a bit of a closer link between the two. But you said there, didn't you, that the City Group own a proportion of their Japanese team, I believe. Am I right in thinking that's the City Group, that's the Man City Group?
Yes.
Perhaps, because I think they have a sponsorship with Nissan, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, but it was more kind of going back to the early 90s when we were kind of, especially when we were really struggling with finances, late 80s, if you like, even going down, where the, I know it ended up being Vaux, but at the time could Nissan have stepped in and went, actually, we'll sponsor the shirt, so
very possibly
to get the place going. And at some point we might dig it out, but it was interesting. I remember that the stadium potentially being built out next to Nissan. It was dubbed the Wembley of the North. And I know that, and we'll dig it out at some point because I did an On This Day a while back digging through some of the newspaper archives, and for a while there was discussion going on about a ground share. I don't know if you remember that.
I can remember that. Yeah. That went down well.
Yeah. I don't think it lasted for very long, but there was talk for a while when Newcastle were kind of trying to look at ways what they were going to do with St James's. We were trying to get out of Roker Park, and there was talk about it for a bit.
Yeah, well, there was. Yeah.
There is a small ground there, because for a while, didn't Sunderland Nissan play in the Northern League? So there is a small football stadium still within the Nissan plant. But yeah, I think the ground share with Newcastle would have been a bit more high profile than a local non-league ground. It might have needed to have been slightly bigger, and it probably would have needed a hell of a lot of security if it was going to be part owned with Sunderland and Newcastle United.
Yeah. Well, it was all the rage in Europe for a good while, wasn't it? And quite a lot of them still do.
It works well in Milan, I think, doesn't it? Yeah.
There's quite, and Turin, there was Torino and Juventus shared their ground for a while, and I think I'm sure in Belgium they did it quite a lot. But I'm just thinking of the arguments that would have happened if it was 1 mile closer to Newcastle or 1 mile closer to Sunderland. I mean, they would have had to work it out where to the centimetre it was, equidistant between the two. But yeah, that would have been interesting. I'll have to dig those out, and we might talk about them. We might come across them during the summer. We'll see what happens. But anyway, let's move on from that Nissan friendly in 1984, I think it was. And let's move on again. We're going to do what we did last time and spend the majority of our time on the first day, and then panic because we've still got the whole week to do. But I want to talk about on this day on the 21st of July, even in 1997, because in 1997, on the 21st of July, the Stadium of Light new ticket office opened, and immediately they received more than 25,000 ticket inquiries for the opening game against Ajax, which was scheduled for the 30th. Now, it's funny because I remember you just think at the time you're going down to have a look, you see it going great guns, and then towards the end you're seeing, a couple of weeks out and there's still big kind of cranes around, and you're thinking, oh, hang on, this is a bit touch and go. And then, but you don't realise until you watch Premier Passions, and then subsequently we had a good conversation with John Ficklin, and he almost, I think, and I'm trying to think of the words, but if you listen back to the podcast with John Ficklin, his words were almost, we shouldn't have really opened, to be honest, if I'm completely honest. We weren't really ready. Because it was touch and go. And as I said, with this ticket office, and I remember at the time talking to plenty of people who everyone was excited about the new season tickets and where your seat was, and you went down to the little porter cabins, which we talked about last time, the visitor centre that you could go on a screen. And the graphics compared to what it would have been now looked absolutely awful. I mean, God, how the hell we could tell what our view was going to be like from those? It was like they'd knocked it up on a Spectrum or something like that. But you went down and you picked where you were going to be, and then you were all excited about it, and then suddenly you were waiting for your season ticket book, and then a different one had turned up where you hadn't bought in a different stand, and you went, oh, hang on, what's this? And then a week later, the right one turned up, and then maybe another one had turned up, and you spoke to other people and went, oh yeah, I've had 4 through the post and stuff like that, and you're thinking, bloody hell, they've made a right hash of this. But it was, I mean, I don't know if you two can remember just the chaos that went at the time, and just with, I assume you both had season tickets for that first year. No, Kelvin didn't.
No.
Can you remember getting yours, Andrew?
Yes, I was one of the few for whom it went pretty smoothly, to be fair. Trying not to sound smug as I say that. But I sorted my season ticket out do you remember when in the main stand, we were talking about it last week actually, the Black Cat Bar later became Roker Snooker Club and then became Reedy's Bar for the last couple of years. I remember me and my mates going in there to sort our season tickets. So that must have been during or towards the end of the previous season before the new ticket office opened. I mean, I wouldn't have fancied that job because Sunderland's attendance is pretty much doubled overnight. But maybe that was because the club were handing out free season, 3 or 4 extra season tickets were landing on people's doors and they were dishing them out to their neighbours. But yeah, there was a lot of problems. I seem to remember there being big queues outside the door of people having these problems, like you said, Chris, and having to go down in person to try and get it sorted. And when you've only just opened up a ticket office and you're trying to get your bearings, that must have been a horrific job to be faced by queues coming up round the corner and what have you. Did you have a season ticket, Chris, then? Did you? Or were you? Oh, yeah.
No, I had a season ticket from Roker Park all the way through until I went to uni, and then I had to give it up. But it is strange looking back, like you said, sorry, Andrew. You were just mentioning attendances there. I mean, when we were in the first division, there was a few games where there were still tickets left in that first division, and I'm just looking back now, and I know attendances aren't an exact science, and it's a bit odd, but you look back at towards the end of that season when Peter Reid obviously kind of took us up, and you're looking in the January and the February at games where we were fighting at the top of the league to get in the Premier League. But I'm looking at Norwich at home at the beginning of January, 14,000. I'm looking at Portsmouth and Ipswich in mid-February, 14,000, 16,000. And that was when we were fighting to get in the top flight. We were kind of, in the top 2, top 3 in the league around then. And so you're talking about in almost a ticket office. I remember, if you remember, the tiny ticket office at Roker Park, where, but bizarrely, other than you're talking about a cup final, cup semi-final, I never remember queuing at those places. Go on, Kelvin.
I was just going to say that that ticket office at Roker Park, when you lived away, like I did, and you were if you wanted a ticket for a game, if there was old ticket games, there wasn't that many games at Roker Park. I remember feeling if I roll in, I ain't going to get in without a ticket over that time, over those early years being marooned up north in Scotland. But I remember ringing the Roker Park ticket office, and like I would ring up. Obviously, I was doing it a fair bit. I would ring up, and quite often would get the same person, and she would say, "Oh, is that you, Kelvin? You know, how are you doing? You know," and you'd have like a conversation with her. And the weirdest thing, the trying to get a ticket for that Ajax game, you know, when you were trying to, you know, to contact them through the phone, loads and loads of trouble getting a ticket. And eventually I got through to somebody, and, you know, they said, "Oh, we can't be able to get those tickets out to you. You'll need to come and pick them up on the night." And I was thinking, oh, God, you know, midweek game, the kids wanted, my son and his pals wanted to come, you know, I'm thinking, pulling them away from school if we don't get in, because that's all you were hearing in the local. You know, I could still get the Journal up in the borders, and all you were hearing was, "Oh, there's big problems, da-di-da-di-da. Will the cranes be off the pitch?" You know, all this stuff. And I'm thinking, oh, you know, I wish I'd never mentioned it, because we're going to stand in a muckle queue and not get into the game. So I rang up again, and I got the bloody lassie that you speak to us in the Roker Park office. "Oh, is that you, Kelvin?" I says, "Oh, thank God. God, for my sins, I cannot remember her name." And I said to her, I said, "Oh, God, I'm just sweating a bit here on the ticket." She says, listen, I'll sort your tickets out. Don't you worry. They'll be here for you, you know. And when I got there, they were there in an envelope with a little heart on the envelope. I still never got to meet her, but it was a nice touch. But you couldn't rely on that personal touch, could you? When there's 40,000 people trying to get tickets in an office that's still not properly built yet. You know, God, it was still a great night. But you're right. It was a kind of stuttery start, wasn't it, to life in the Stadium of Light?
It was absolutely chaotic, and I'm sure we'll leave the Ajax friendly for Martin to go through, because I'm sure he'll touch on that on the 30th. I don't want to get into trouble with Martin about going into that. But just on the ticket front, I mean, it's funny, isn't it? You talk about that personal touch, Kelvin, and with a couple of them, they were probably, that tiny ticket office at Roker Park was probably more efficient than when we had like 10, 20 of them at one point at the Stadium of Light, and it's amazing. And Andrew, you might be able to help us, but for the life of us right now, I can't remember the fella who goes to the meetings with the club, and he's the one who rings around the 92 clubs, the ticket offices, and he basically said to the club that, he said, "I've rang all 92 clubs in the Premier League and the Football League, rang the ticket office. Sunderland was the only one that I couldn't get in touch with." And that was like about a year or something in the meetings. It's amazing. It's amazing how things change. But yes, going back to 1997, it was absolute chaos at the Stadium of Light. If you want to go back and listen to that John Ficklin interview we did, it was eye opening, and we'll touch on more of that, because he had some good stories around that Ajax game. So moving on again, 21st of July 2004, striker Darren Byfield left to sign for Gillingham on a free transfer. And then we move on to 2006 on July the 21st. Kelvin Davis. And funny, because this one, apart from giving me a little twitch when I think about it, Kelvin Davis, when I was reading up, it said he was transferred for 800,000, but I thought it was a Bosman from Ipswich. But I might be wrong, because it's actually made it worse that we paid some money for him. When I look back, I always thought it was a free transfer. And to be fair, I don't know about what you lads thought at the time, but I actually thought on paper this was a decent signing, because he was good for Ipswich.
He was. Was it? I think it might have been Tommy Miller who was the Bosman, and we did spend a bit. Is that right?
I tell you why, because I've got it completely wrong. That's why, because on 21st of July in 2006. He actually left to go to Southampton for 800,000.
Oh, well.
That's why I've got it wrong. We didn't sign him. I was so transfixed on the day we signed him, thinking I didn't think of that, the joyous occasion when we left. So in fact, actually, we made 800,000. So that's made me a happy man, and we can move on from Kelvin Davis. So let's move on to July the 22nd, because we go on to into 1978, and something Kelvin wants to talk about, which is Mel Holden, because on the 22nd of July 1978, Mel Holden went to Blackpool for £60,000, Kelvin.
He did, and he went and joined Bob Stokoe at Blackpool. Bob Stokoe was the manager and paid 60,000 for him. And Stokoe had been the manager in 1975, in May 1975, when he bought him from Preston for £120,000. He was just 20 years old, and he's a real sort of phenomenon, Mel Holden. Chris, you often ask me, what was he like as a player? I want you to imagine a giraffe running across the savannah or the veldt.
Right, I've got that image, Kelvin.
Yeah, and that, for me, I always think of that when I start to talk about Mel Holden.
Stick a ball at the Joss feet and you've got it.
Just about. So he was built like Niall Quinn, but he only had odd moments like Niall Quinn, I have to say. He came, I suspect, off the back of a game that I saw him play against us in 1972-73, when we were involved in a relegation scrap and moving towards winning the FA Cup. I went down to Deepdale in the middle of the week and watched us play Preston. Now, we beat them 3-1. We had our cup final team out that night, and Mel Holden gave Dave Watson a bit of a tough time that night. And I remember clocking him and thinking, I've never seen Dave Watson look as sort of awkward. He was having a lot of trouble with that young lad. I think Stokoe clocked him that night, and thought, ooh, this lad's got a little bit about him, and bought him 120,000. He was a vital partnership in our 75-76 season with Pop Robson. They scored 15 goals each in that season, and him and Pop played really well together. Robson kind of had the art of dancing around Holden when he was causing a bit of mayhem in the book. And they got 15 goals each. And that was, I think I said on a previous pod, it was one of the seasons I really enjoyed watching the team, and Holden was part of that. What he wasn't, I have to tell you, was he wasn't silky. He wasn't. Niall Quinn, when he came to us, he could be almost balletic for a big lad. Niall Quinn. Mel Holden was never that. He was big. He was 6'3". He was capable of some supreme aerial moments and layoffs as well as goals. His hold-up play could be good, and he used to draw a lot of fouls. But he was terribly inconsistent. He was awkward. He would have these moments of really poor control, and he had this thing back then. Of course, we didn't know back then what was going on with him. But sometimes he just looked like he wasn't trying. And it really got on the nerves of some fans that was going on with him. But he's probably, I would say to you, he'll be a favourite of a lot of fans of the era as well. I'm trying not to use the term a bit of a Marmite player, but there were people that really, really loved him, and others that couldn't be doing with him. He used to get pelters. Fair Mel Holden. He had a great third touch. and things like, he's got a great knack of getting smaller every time he jumps for the ball, and stuff like that. Now I always used to feel that was a bit harsh on Mel. There used to be a great banner at the back of the Roker end that said, Super Mel rules the skies. And it was great, I always felt him trotting out and seeing that. As a young lad, because he's still, comparatively speaking, a young lad when he came to us. He played 37 games in that 75-76 season, scored 15 goals, 76-77, the great, the almost great escape season. He plays 26 games and scores 10 goals. And then in 77-78, by this time, Jimmy Adamson's here, and, he's lost form, He's not doing so well when he comes into the team. He plays 11 games and scores 2 goals. A difficult period for him. That he just wasn't getting games, and when he was coming on, he just didn't look like he was going to do the business. But if I tell you about a couple of highlights I remember about Mel, I always remember in the Great Escape season, the 76-77 season, and this was typical of what you would see from him. We played a game against Birmingham, coming towards the end of that season. It was a really tight, hard game. Jimmy Montgomery played in goals for Birmingham that night. That's one of the things I remember about it. And in the 84th minute, Tony Towers sent a cross into the box, and Mel Holden out of nowhere just rises to that ball and rocketed it into the back of the net. And we won that game 1 to keep our chances of staying up going. But I tell you, a couple of minutes earlier, Bobby Kerr had ducked in and absolutely hammered a shot goalward, and it was heading in. And from nowhere, Mel Holden got in the road of it and put it over the bar. That was just kind of typical of what would happen when you were watching him play. He was, he would have you screaming up your voice at him and then screaming for him for a goal. He broke the 11 game in that 76-77 season. Went 11 games without scoring a goal. So you were rolling in. I was following us home and away. 11 games without a goal, and then on a Dreek night against Bristol City at Roker, he popped up with a goal at the Roker end, a header. And I mean, he could do that. He would, however badly you might think he was playing, he would pop up with a crucial goal. I think there's a game that you'll get easily on YouTube, the 6-0 hammering of West Ham United, and he scores 2 goals in that game, but he scores the first one within a couple of minutes, and I just love that. For if you want to know who Mel Holden was, the way he gets the goal, he's like a demented giraffe running for the ball to get it, but if you watch him every week, you just know he's going to get it. And he puts it in the back of the net. And he comes up in like 3 different stages, like a transformer or something, and he lifts his hands, and the whole of the full end is just going bonkers, because we're on a right run. We'd beaten Borough 4-0. And we were like, bloody hell, this is on, and he just takes the acclaim of the crowd, and you really felt like, I was in the full end that day, and I just thought, he's come home, Mel, this is going to be it, he's going to do the business. Marvellous sort of moment for him, given where his career went. He had other moments which weren't as great. We played Newcastle later on in that season, and a lot of people reference this when they're getting on about the clangers that he dropped. We played Newcastle that season. We went 2-0 up, and I mean, we were hammering them, absolutely hammering them. And Kevin Arnott slipped the ball through to him and put him through on Mick Mahoney, who was Newcastle's keeper that night. So he was through on Mick Mahoney, herring towards goal, and he somehow contrived to backheel the ball to a Newcastle defender, herring in on goal at the Roker end. I was in the Roker end that day. The chance went, and didn't Newcastle come back to draw the game? Clawed us back and drew the game 2-2 each. A lot of people had a muckle go at him about that. It was a moment, I think, that could have been different. So he had these moments in him where, he seemed to, he got in the road of a few shots that, with our players, they might rebound off them and go in the goals. With him, they seemed to go over the bar. It was like he was almost a 12th defender for the opposition sometimes. He definitely did it at Spurs. He got in the road of one there. And I remember playing Coventry, I think it was. He got the ball, he was about a yard out, and blasted it over the bar. And
but to be fair, Carl, I mean, looking, he was only what? I think he was 20.
Yeah,
or something, 21 maybe.
Yeah,
when he arrived at Sunderland.
Yeah,
so he was only a young lad and it was.
He was.
It was we were with cup winners a couple of years prior, so it was a decent move for him.
Oh, it was a good move for him. It was, on paper, it was a good move for, and I would still argue that 75-76 season, he was a crucial addition to the team, and he really brought the best out of Pop Robson to take us to the championship that year. He was crucial, and then in 76-77. He was a big part of that effort. I mean, you had to be around. I mean, it's awful if you weren't around, but to have experienced that near miracle escape and that run of games where we hadn't scored a goal for 11 games, and then we win one with Holden goal, and then the next week 4-0 Borough, 6-0 West Ham, 6-1 against West Brom, playing unbelievably. It was like you were watching. It was like watching Barcelona. It was unbelievable, and he was a big part of that. Big part of that. I thought he played well with Tony Towers. I always thought Tony Towers had his radar, and in his earlier times with us, Porter as well, Porterfield, had him on his radar, and used to be able to, an accurate crosser, an accurate passer would, he was 6'3", and I don't think he did get smaller when he jumped, despite what some of his critics used to say. So he was a favourite to some and not to others. I have many, despite his calamities, I would say that he's a favourite of mine. I have some fond memories of him through that period. And then, of course, Jimmy Adamson arrives, and Adamson obviously doesn't fancy him. And, I think probably he gives Adamson some grounds. He looks really out of touch that year, and has some awful moments on the pitch. We don't know. I don't think anybody can say because he was diagnosed with motor neuron disease in 1979. Was that playing on him at that point? To the best of my ability, I would say it would be impossible to think that it wasn't. And when he goes to Blackpool, he only plays 3 games, and then they sell him to a Dutch team for 40,000, I think it is. They get a bit of money for him, but he only plays 10 games for them, scores 1 goal, and by the time he's done that, he's got his diagnosis, and he has to stop playing. Terrible disease, motor neuron disease, but he is particularly young, because he spends a year in a wheelchair and passes away in very early 1981 at the age of 26. Tragic stuff. Whenever I talk about him, I think of that moment against West Ham, and he's scoring that goal, the demented giraffe moment. He gets there, he puts the ball in the back of the net, and when he gets up, he just sticks them big hands, big arms up in the air, and the whole of the full well just gives it to him. That's how I like to think of him. Mel Holden, Super Mel rules the skies.
Yeah, unbelievably sad how it turned out, but it kind of just shows again. He joined us young, but also left young. So what? He was 24 at the time. We got 60,000 from Bob Stoker. Obviously liked him, Kelvin, because he signed him for Sunderland and signed him again for Blackpool. So was it purely that falling out with? You said he fell out with Jimmy Adamson, or did you think he'd ran his course at Sunderland as well?
He made a couple of remarks to the local press, Mel Holden, about not getting games, and that he was sort of he wasn't a daft laddie, Mel Holden. He like, one of the things I remember was where he said to the press, "I'm at a great club. Why would I go anywhere else? This is a great club." And then said, "But if I'm not going to get played, I'm going to need to go somewhere else." And it was quite a clever piece of levering, I think, going on. Either give us if you're not going to play us, sell us, because I need to play. Aye. All I'm saying, to be balanced about it, was some of his latter games, he really did look like he was struggling. He really did look like he was struggling. And the crowd, I'm not going to say the absolute majority of the crowd, but more and more of the crowd seemed to be ready to get on his back a bit, as soon as he came on a number of times sub, and when you're coming on as a sub and the crowd are barracking you almost, you're thinking, I don't know. He said it's time to go, but
just to remind people once again of your Scottish allegiances, Kelvin. But was he ever close to getting a cap? Or was he miles away?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think, depending on what day any international manager or scout was coming to watch him, my guess would be that they would be going back saying, I don't know about this lad. The thing was, his goal scoring record wasn't bad at all. If he played 158 games and scored 46 goals.
About 1 in 3, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's not bad for it's not a bad record that he's got. And when he was on. He was a handful. So I say that day when Preston got beat, I've already said I was at that game, but it's one of the few times where I've seen Davy Watson looking like, bloody hell, I've got my hands full here. But there you go. Mel Holden. Super Mel rules the skies.
Good stuff, brilliant stuff. And but just quickly on Bob Stoker, actually, just before we leave this one, Kelvin, because he came to Sunderland from Blackpool, and his move was delayed because he'd gotten Blackpool through the quarter-final of the League Cup, I think it was.
Correct.
But he was popular at Blackpool, and I was when I've read about Bob Stoker leaving Sunderland, it seemed like trying to get Sunderland into the first division really took it out of him, and he had, he was getting those migraines and things like that. I mean, were you surprised that he popped back up again at Blackpool when
I wasn't?
When he left?
I wasn't, in the sense of he was if he'd sorted his health issues, he was clearly a guy that had something. I think Bob Stoker was he 46 when he took us over? He's one of these guys that looked the same for about 25 years, I mean, people still say to me, I look 28, so he's,
Oh, 25, Kelvin. Come on.
so
Being hot.
Stokoe himself was quite young when he came to us as a manager. But when he came, he had a track record for being able to work with not too much and get the very best out of it. And to be fair to Stokoe, he could spot a player. He could in the bargain basement and spot a player, Bob Stokoe. He was good at that. So, and he was a straight up and down character. When we were talking before about Brian Clough, I think Stokoe was a much more easier to understand, easier to work out. You knew what you were going to get, and he was, I think, scrupulously honest kind of guy. Well, he was another. There are many, many stories about how much he hated getting beat at anything. I think he threatened us to sack his number 2 one time because he fluffed a shot on a golf course. And there was, I think that's a true story. And in the five-a-side games at training, he would still play and he would kick like Dennis Stewart and Billy Hughes and people like that if they skipped past him. I mean, there was none of this whole keeping the players wrapped in cotton wool. If Bob was playing against you, he's going to hoof you up a height, if you're going to score against him. So he didn't like getting beat. And I think he passed that on to his teams, this will to win kind of thing.
Yeah.
He'll have seen a bit of Mel Holden across in the Northwest. Well, that Blackpool, Preston, Burnley. It's like the Bermuda Triangle, that, isn't it? You're never very far away from a football league team over there.
Yeah. I remember Peter Reid liked to do his shopping in there quite a bit, didn't he? Back in the day when he was Sunderland manager. But so that's Mel Holden in 1978. So again, July 22nd. This is what we're on. 1984. Stuart Downing is born in Middlesbrough on July the 22nd. In 1987, Sunderland-born fullback John Kay is signed from Wimbledon for £22,500. I mean, what a bargain signing that was from Dennis Smith. I think we kind of slightly touched on it last week in that one. 1994. Now, Andrew, I might need your help with this one. I know you wrote this one, but the lads won 2-0 at, and this was the one pre-season in Norway. Let's have a go at this. Avroy Kamaratin. That's my go at it anyway.
Why do you think I didn't pick to discuss that game?
I did notice anyway. That was so that they won 2-0 at a place in Norway as they won pre-season tour. Craig Russell and Phil Gray got the second half goal.
Was Trevor Fjord playing that day?
Oh. Well, I'll tell you what, we might get into it another time actually, because it's in. And again, Andrew's written about this tour on the site a couple of times, a couple of games. But you mentioned Trevor then. Trevor Hartley purposely gave the players absolutely nothing on this tour, did he, Andrew? And they were all bored set.
I think by the end of the trip they were going out of their minds. The accommodation was pretty basic. I think that either the place they were staying or the place where they had one of the games was called Hell.
Yeah, that was it. That was the next one.
And the players were in full agreement with that because it was not a sightseeing trip or a trip of team bonding where you're heading out to the local bars. It was a proper slog, and you think footballers have a glamorous life going away and playing football and that. This didn't sound like that. It sounded like a tough old pre-season.
To me, it just seemed like this pre-season tour was a personification of Mick Buxton and Trevor Hartley, to be honest. It was a complete reflection on them. But we might get into that another time because, again, July 22nd, 2012, we're playing in the Peace Cup in South Korea. We beat Groningen. Dutch side 3-2, goals from Wickham, Campbell and Noble. And actually, there was a little tidbit on this I just wanted to raise, and I probably can't find it as we're playing. But Andrew, again, I'm going to put you on the spot. This here, Smithson, who writes for the website, and he keeps giving us these little details. It was, and because this was a trip in South Korea, like as the Peace Cup, and later on it was something was worked out where the Team Korea boats that competed in the America's Cup ended up having the Sunderland crest on.
Yes, you're right. Very bizarrely, I think at that time Sunderland were really trying to capitalise on their Premier League status and were trying to get the, it's a horrible word, get the brand out. And yes, we did. We sponsored a boat, which is bizarre to see, on the footage and that. It's a bit like at the moment, I've been looking at footage of the lads training in Portugal. And I don't know if you've spotted this, but in the background on the training ground, they've got all of these like Sunderland badges and motivational speeches. So it's like a little tiny corner of Sunderland in Portugal at the moment. And yeah, having a boat taking part in a famous race like that is nice to see. One of those events which I have no knowledge of, but if there's a boat with a Sunderland crest on it, I'm suddenly the biggest fan, and I'm cheering them on. And
well, if like I said, if you check out Andrew's piece on the site, Andrew's found an image of the actual boat with a crest on, which is absolutely fantastic. But we move on to 2016, and this one's purely we weren't going to touch on it that much, but I really want to now because of Kelvin's reaction when we touched on it before we started recording. This was Sam Allardyce, who on the 22nd of July officially took up residency at the FA with the England job and left us. And I mean, basically, this all started when Harry Kane started taking corners. Of course, that was the start of it in the European Championships for England. And then Roy Hodgson's England get beat 2-1 by Iceland in the last 16. Which obviously triggered his resignation. The FA then dithered for a month. Apparently on the shortlist was Steve Bruce, who'd recently resigned from Hull. Eddie Howe was on the shortlist at the time, apparently, who was apparently the other front runner with Sam Allardyce was actually Jurgen Klinsmann, apparently, looking back at this. Now, for those of us who were around and kind of following this at the time, we will think back to a pre-season friendly at Hartlepool United, which was on the Wednesday, so this was the 20th. And Sam Allardyce in the first half, he was on the phone in the dugout. He had his mobile phone up, and I'm just looking at the bit I read on it, and I did a caption for the photograph where he's on his phone, and I said, yes, in speech marks, I said, yes, a 15-inch meat feast and a side of cheesy chips, please. Or what I thought Sam Allardyce was saying on the phone. But he was, of course, probably on the phone to his agent or whoever sorting out what was going on with the FA, because in the second half he was gone. He left at half-time. But I purely wanted to cover this, Kelvin, because of your instant reaction to it, where most people are kind of, this is where it all began, but you seem to have a strong reaction to this happening.
Yeah, just it's a game of opinions, isn't it? Allardyce, I never sort of took to him. He came as a player. He came and left. He was gone within a season. He was a functional enough centre half for me, but I remember Rob Mason saying how much he liked him, so I can take that. It's a game of opinions, football. He was never, for me, that good a player. I wasn't that upset when he left the first time. I was very upset when he left the second time, very upset, because as a manager, I thought he'd done some good work at various clubs, and for my sins, I actually did feel that he was a good fit for us. I didn't particularly like him as a character, but if he's going to do business with my team, and I think he got all excited, and then at the drop of a hat, shall I say, off he goes at half time. Off he goes to take on the England job. So yeah, and I don't know what the detail of this is. Somebody more in the know of these things will tell me. But I did feel like he brought in some players on contracts that left us a little bit. We were in trouble after that with some of them contracts, and I would have preferred it had he seen the job out. He wasn't the only one to do that, and probably some of my feelings about that are soured with what came afterwards. But he's disappointed. I was disappointed, to say the least, in the way, not just him leaving, but the way that he did it. So you're going to counter that with?
No, it's funny because I was gonna put it across to Andrew, because obviously there is a bit of a split. Most of the people, I would say, were going, "Oh, that could have been something." But when I was looking back, it is a strange thing, Andrew. When I look at that season and when he came in, he actually went on a run of winning 3 in 19 games, and then won 3 of the last 6 to keep us up. So it wasn't as if kind of he burst through the doors and went, right, I'm coming here to fix everything, and we never lost a game after that. He kept us up. He did the job he was brought in to do. But then, Andrew, that summer, I'm convinced that even if the England job hadn't come up, that he wouldn't have been in that dugout for that opening game.
Yeah. I'm of the same opinion. There were rising tensions between him and Ellis Short pretty much as soon as that Everton game finished. And I think we then played away at Watford to finish off the season, but our last home game was against Everton. It was a great night. We won 3-0. Everybody's going home absolutely buzzing. But apparently, whilst we're all heading away, riding the crest of a wave, apparently there was already discussions then about what's my budget for next season, and Allardyce wasn't pleased with the answers. Funny, isn't it? Allardyce, I know it was only a pre-season game, but Allardyce just clearing off at half-time in a friendly is not, it's not great. I appreciate he's a proud Englishman and he wants to take the England job, but, you could at least see the match out. I mean, England aren't going to go anywhere for 45 minutes.
They've not gone anywhere for a lot longer than that, Andrew.
Boo. Yeah, well, England were bad at that point. You're quite right, Chris. Money was an issue. And something Kelvin said there, I think is true as well. We were struggling, only 3 wins in 19. I remember that. I remember a game at home that was like pulling teeth. We lost to Southampton, I think it was, because we went and gave away a penalty late on and the mood was not good. But in January, he turned it round by bringing a lot of good quality players. But as you said, Kelvin, one of the issues with Lamine Kone, if I remember rightly, then did he go and take himself to Merseyside ahead of potential talks with Everton? He was adamant, if I remember rightly, that Allardyce had promised to sort him out with a better contract in the summer if he came in, did a decent job. There was this supposed bumper pay deal in the offing, but Allardyce just up sticks and left. Kone's then said, well, however, fair's fair. I've been told by a representative of the club I'm going to be getting an improved deal. Obviously, that didn't happen. I do think in January, Allardyce was quite persuasive in getting players to come here and maybe suggested certain things to them which were never really going to happen. And from what I gather, that was the case with a lot of his clubs. He was very good at the gift of the gab and getting people over the line. Whether some of those plans were actually as concrete as he made out, I don't know.
Yeah, well, you said he was good at the gift of the gab, but obviously that's what undid him at England. So
Exactly.
which made it absolutely fantastic for us as we started the season. David Moyes, but let's get into let's move away from that. July the 23rd. That's what we need to move on to. 1953, goalkeeper Harry Threadgold is transferred to Southend United for £3,500. We talked about this on the last couple of pods, actually, so we'll leave this one because it's 1966 on July the 23rd, where Roker Park stages its only World Cup quarter-final, in which USSR beat Hungary 2-1 in front of 26,844. Just quickly, Kelvin, because you went to that one, you didn't go to this quarter-final, did you?
I didn't know, and Yashin played in that game.
Yeah, typical. Oh, well, you had a choice of two. Never mind. It sometimes goes that way. 1984, on July the 23rd, striker Pop Robson ended his third annual playing spell with Sunderland when he moved to Carlisle United. On a free transfer, he did end up back at the club as a scout and then a coach, a youth team extraordinaire and all of that. So, yes, he did end up back at Sunderland. Also, on July 23rd, 1999, Sunderland received their record transfer fee when Michael Bridges was sold to Leeds United for £5 million. And we've talked a little bit about that summer of 1999, where the first stage of it was just us losing a lot of players, actually. And a lot of people were panicking. But anyway, moving on to the 24th of July. And we mentioned this guy on a previous podcast, because in 1958, Northern Irish international Billy Bingham is transferred to Luton Town for £15,000. 1996, Steaua Bucharest were the visitors to Roker Park for Richard Ord's testimonial, well-deserved testimonial as well. And the Romanian side won 1-0 in front of 8,808 people. Just quickly, this was the testimonial at Roker Park, just off memory. Yeah, 1996, that would be right, because we moved the following summer, yes. So that would be right. Also, to do with Richard Ord, in 1998, on the 24th of July, he was transferred to Queen's Park Rangers for £675,000. On the same day in 2003, midfielder Gavin McCann was transferred to Aston Villa for £2.25 million. This was, of course, the summer we were relegated and we had a mass exodus. But, of course, he was only signed for £500,000, so we didn't do too bad on him at the time. 24th of July, again, we move up to 2009. Amsterdam tournament. We are beaten 2-0 to Benfica, but this is a really busy day. Just to touch on this a little bit in terms of Steve Bruce being busy, because not only are we beaten 2-0 by Benfica, but on the same day we sell Dean Whitehead to Stoke City for £5 million, and we also sign Lorixana. So almost like a direct swap for, I think that was £5.5 million actually in the end. So it was roughly about the same price. So kind of not a bad deal. And of course, talking about profits, I think one of Mick McCarthy's bargain signing, something like 150,000, 200,000, something like that from Oxford United. Then we go and sell him, kind of, was it 6 or something like that, for £5 million. The other thing, just quickly, because I said it was a busy day on that day in 2009, the other thing that happened, that was reported on that day, the day of the Benfica game, Bordeaux's Marouane Chamakh, who ended up signing for Arsenal, he publicly declared his desire to sign for Sunderland, despite his coach Laurent Blanc suggesting he could find a, quote, better club. He had 1 year left on his contract, and the French striker was being tracked by Arsenal and Juventus at the time. But he stated publicly, he said, "I have told Bordeaux I need to go there and I want to play in the Premier League, and Sunderland is a good challenge for me. As far as Arsenal are concerned, it has taken too long, unlike Sunderland." But he didn't end up coming, so it makes no difference. He did end up waiting for Arsenal a year later on a Bosman. But anyway, last one on July the 24th. And I'm going to talk on this very, very briefly with a hint of sadness, because this was July the 24th, 2013. Sunderland beat Spurs 3-1 in the Premier League Asia Trophy in Hong Kong. Now, this was the point I thought we were going to qualify for the Champions League or something like that. I thought, oh, we're away here. It was actually, for what it turned out, it was bizarrely a really memorable summer. But this one, kickoff was delayed by 40 minutes because of a torrential downpour, and then the game was changed to 40 minutes each way. But yeah, Cabral scored, Wes Brown scored, and Moberg Carlson scored, and we beat a really strong Spurs side. And I thought Cabral was a world beater in this. I thought he was fantastic off this. Well, I want to say 90 minutes, this 80 minutes. But you're both nodding your head. Do you remember this one?
He had his moments, Cabral, did he not?
Well, he had this one moment, I think, as far as I remember.
I remember the game, and like you're suggesting, Chris, being really excited. Was it Defanti who was bringing in all of these players like Cabral, and we were thinking, hey, we've cracked it here. We're picking up all of these brilliant players, and it just did not happen for them.
Giaccherini was exciting. Diakite on a free from Lazio was exciting. Yeah, but anyway, I thought we were going places. But anyway, let's move on, because I remember thinking we'd cracked it then. But anyway, July the 25th, and in 1973, it was a fantastic year for Sunderland, of course, because Kevin Phillips was born in Hitchin. So it all came together in 1973. 1977, and we'll leave this for another time for Kelvin to get into properly, because England international midfielder Tony Towers is transferred to Birmingham City for 140,000. He's still going to do a deep dive on one more, so he might touch a little bit on Tony Towers. We will see. The next one, Andrew, brings in the quiz from last week.
Yes, correct. We featured this player in the quiz last week because on July the 25th, 2000, aged 19, we signed a player who scored on his debut, was at the club for about 6 years before he moved on, and he did come back to do a bit of coaching at the Academy of Light. Really popular player, somebody we spoke about a lot on a recent Top 10s podcast about overseas players. So if people haven't caught up with that yet, it's another pod of ours that's worth digging out. The answer was, of course, Julio Arca.
It was, and he rocked up on the fullback one as well, which was
he did
subject of a big debate whether he should have or not. But we stuck him in because. Although he's brilliant.
He was a fullback.
Well, yeah, he was, and I think if we didn't have as good left backs at the time, he probably would have played more there, to be honest. But yes, he was in 2000. Julio Arca signed from Argentinos Juniors for $3.5 million at the time, which was an absolute bargain at the time. And I remember, I think Middlesbrough started the kind of going to South America thing with Juninho and Emerson. Apparently, reading a book as well, they almost got Roberto Carlos out of Middlesbrough, out of Brazil, before that, and it fell through in the end. But yeah, anyway, so he was signed on the 25th of July in the year 2000, and then we move up to 2006, a one for that we'll have a deep dive on at some point in the future. We'll leave this one because in 2006, Chairman Niall Quinn appointed himself as manager out of pure desperation until he found the right manager for the club. I think actually going back to Allardyce had knocked him back, I think, at this point. O'Neill, I think, had knocked him back. And he'd already made the statement that he was going to get a world-class manager, so he'd locked himself in a corner, hadn't he, Andrew?
He had. I mean, to be fair, I can think of a few chairmen who probably thought they could do a better job as a manager than the people they employed. Wow. Whereas for Quinn, like you say, it was out of necessity rather than ego.
I mean, Ken Knighton jumps in my head. I mean, not many chairmen have started juggling the ball in the centre circle and all that.
Was that that was the Man United fella who ended up at Carlisle? Is that right?
Yes, it was. Yeah, because he was about to take over at Man United, and in the end, it fell through. He says there's a story. I think Ferguson says in his book. I think he says someone burst into his office before, like, he's preparing for this game. Someone says, "This fella's asked for a spare kit." He's like, "Who?" He said, "Oh, this Knighton fella who's be taking over the club." He said, "What's he asked for?" He said, "Just give him whatever." And then he said he had this monitor in his office. He says the next thing he knows, There's this little fat fella in the middle of the pitch keeping the ball up in a Man United strip.
I
But,
remember that. It was
yeah.
class
And
bit
then
of television, that.
he ends up with Carlisle years later. But there you go. So Niall Quinn appointed himself, and then brought Bobby Saxton back, and you thought, oh, if this works, but he ends up going out to get Niall Quinn. But anyway, on the 25th of July, our last one is 1988. Anthony Stokes is born on the 25th of July. Then we move on to the 26th of July. Fantastic day, because it's my birthday for a start, and I've just found out, because the next day, I didn't know this until we started preparing for this, that I share a birthday with Laurie McMenemy.
Dear.
I didn't know this until we were preparing for this podcast. I'm scared now what else I might find out on this podcast, to be honest. 1936, Laurie McMenemy was born in Gateshead. And let's move on.
Chris, I was going to wish you happy birthday, but now I know who you share it with. I'm not going to bother. Just going to ignore it.
Bad day all round, that.
Yeah. Absolutely shocking. But let's move on. 1954, of Arthur Bridget, who made around 350 appearances for Sunderland between 1902 and 1912. Actually scored twice in the 9-1 win against Newcastle in 1908, and is Sunderland's second most capped England player. Behind which player, gentlemen?
I'm definitely not wishing you happy birthday now, Chris, because you've
threw that one at you.
With that one. England caps.
He's second most England capped player while with the club, behind one player.
How many caps did this person
Dave Watson.
Dave Watson.
Oh, well done.
I could see those cogs turning, Kelvin. You rarely go quiet like that when you're really just staring.
The smoke's a bit of a giveaway as well.
Apparently he's a very religious man who would never play on Christmas Day and Good Friday, apparently. But there you go. And moving on to our next one, because this is a good one for Kelvin, because 1977. Sunderland sold their 1973 FA Cup final goal scorer Ian Porterfield to Sheffield Wednesday for 20,000. Kelvin.
Oh, yeah. The end of an association, never to be forgotten. Association, Ian Porterfield. His FA Cup winning goal will always be the thing that makes him stand out, especially with younger fans. Who never saw him play, and it was a fantastic time to be around the club, and to see all that happen. And I'll be eternally grateful for having had the chance to watch all that. But I tell you, Ian Porterfield was more than just the FA Cup final winning goal. This lad was a smashing player. He came in December 1967 following the sale of Jim Baxter, and ironically, big shoes to fill. And he came from the same club as Jim Baxter. They both played for Raith. And earlier in the season, I think it was the October, Ian McCull, the manager, had bought Sunderland up to play a Fife select team in a benefit match for there was a disaster at a pit called the Michael Colliery in Fife, and McCull bought his team up in quite a strong team up to play in a benefit match, and the Fife select included Dunfermline, East Fife and Raith. Were just three of the teams that they would pick from, and Ian Porterfield was playing that night. Totally outshone Jim Baxter. Was man of the match. Scored a goal with his right foot. Something
famous right foot.
Yeah, his famous right foot, and created another one, and I think really caught Ian McCall's eye that night. Going into the Christmas period, I think they then started courting him a little bit, trying to see what the state of play was with the club and whether he could get some of the money that had been paid for Baxter. And going into the Christmas period, Man City step in and offer 35,000 for him to Wraith, and but Wraith had put this £45,000 price on him. So McCall quickly gets in and signs him for that. And I mean, it's unbelievable now when you think of all the carry on and everything's just being played out on your transfer program on Sky, and all that. But he signs him up in Kirkcaldy, and then drives him down. They arrive at the Roker Hotel at 1:30 in the morning. He deposits Porterfield in there with a flask of soup, and then comes back the next morning. They do some medical exams, and he plays on the Saturday afternoon. He plays December the 30th against Newcastle in the derby. He just throws him straight in there, McCall, into that derby. And it's a helter-skelter game, and a game I was at. I saw that game and can remember it really, really well, because it was 3-0, and Porterfield, he did well, although he was asked to do a marking job on a very good Newcastle player called Jim Ailey, and he did do canny. Ailey was a Wiley customer.
Didn't see that coming.
And that game was in front of, I think it was nigh on 47,000 people in the ground that day. It was a massive crowd. And he said about his debut, he said, the Roker fans really coasted in. I remember thinking it must be great to play in front of these fans every week. But I was asked to mark Jim Ailey, and he said, I'm much better when people are marking me. So he was a confident lad. He had a lot of confidence in his own ability. Did he in Porterfield? He was confident in that regard. He could have been a Leeds player when he was 13. He had a kick around on the green at Lochgelly, where he was from, watched by Don Revie. And Don Revie's wife, Elsie, was related to the people that owned the store in Lochgelly, and they'd been badgering him about this young laddie that was a really good player. So Revie took him for a kick around on the pitch and then arranged for a month's trial at Leeds. So when he was, I think he was 14, coming up 15, he goes to Leeds for a month, which is a right carry on. I mean, you think about him, McCall picking him up and just bringing him up down in the derby. He just drops out of school for a month and goes to Leeds. But it was all organised. Off he goes for a month. His father stays a week with him, and then his grandfather comes down and stays a week with him. His memory of that was Don Revie looked after him really well. But he got terribly homesick. And although he got invited back, he never went back. And that could have been, that's one of those what-if moments. What if he hadn't gotten homesick and settled? And, you could have seen him in that Leeds United team, the kind of player that he was. Fine player. It's interesting. You sometimes say, I'm not an England fan. I don't know if I've ever told you that. So I follow. I do follow.
You need to keep reminding us.
I do follow Scottish football a bit. And in 1962, he wends his way to a team called Lochfair, who at the time were one of the feeder clubs for the junior football. They're called a junior football team. But they're one of the feeder clubs for all the main Scottish the top Scottish teams, and he's desperate. He's a bit of a Rangers fan, as Porter, and would have welcome approach from Rangers, I think, but it never actually came. It was Raith that came calling, and he went there, and Raith sells. Lockyer Welfare got £250 from from Raith. Always interested in this. The deals that are done with the non-professional teams, And then when he comes to Sunderland, he's just 21 years old, so he's still, comparatively speaking, quite a young lad. But he's got a bit of experience behind him. He's played 117 games for Raith, who primarily have played in the Scottish top division. He's got lots of experience of playing against Celtic, Rangers, Hibs, Hearts, Aberdeen. He's got quite a bit of experience there, and the records, the press cuttings and everything about those games seem to suggest that he could get himself noticed in those games, and that he made his mark in those games. So after his debut, he quickly he's a bit of a McCall favourite, and quickly slides into the team. But then McCall gets the sack. The results aren't great. Some of the performances are okay, but the results aren't great. And in comes Alan Brown, and he goes out of the team coming into the end of the season. He comes back in for a couple of games because of injuries, but it's clear that Brown, he's not quite the favourite with Brown as he was with McCall. And if you look at Ian Porterfield's playing record with us, you'll not find anything for 1969-70. And that's because on a pre-season tour, which wasn't to Norway,
Wasn't to hell.
It was West Germany, which as it was then. There's a bit of a fallout with Brown. Brown wants to play him wide on the left, almost as a left winger, and he also wants him to track back up that left wing. And in Porterfield has always considered himself to be a midfielder, left-hand side of the midfield, left half, the Jim Baxter position, if you want. And when he actually signed for Raith, and this is the kind of lad that he was, the reason he signed was for us to play him there. They wouldn't play him up front. They wouldn't play him on the left wing. They'd play him at left half, and he gets his game there and gets good at playing there. And we've talked about this before. Forms are starting to change as well. So it's we're moving to 4-4-2 time. But he's saying, look, I'm a midfielder. I'm a midfielder, and that's where I want to play. He falls out with Brown on this tour, and without going into all the detail, Brown's got him playing out on the left wing. He's not getting the ball. He goes inside looking for it. Brown gives him pelters and tells him to get back there. So he has a couple of games like this, and then he made a mistake, as he calls it, of actually responding to Brown when Brown in the dressing room says, we're going to play 4-3-3. That's this formation. Porterfield, you're out on the left wing. And then Brown says to the players, what do you think? Of course, Porterfield, being the type of lad he is, still reasonably new in the dressing room, thinks he's being invited to comment. And he wasn't there, because none of the other, even the more experienced players who didn't like that formation, they weren't saying anything to Brown because they knew what would happen. And Porter has his say. He says, I don't think this is working. You're not getting the best out of me. I don't think it works for the team. That he offers up these, if you want, these considered opinions, and him and Brown end up in a screaming match with each other. He basically, Brown sidelines him for a season. So he loses a whole season of his career, is lost. at that point. He gets back in when him and Brown meet up. And of course, if you know your history, you know that in 69-70, we got relegated. And I watched the team all the way through that season. It was dreadful. We were crying out for a bit of creativity. And you had people like Joe Baker looking for the ball and getting out, you know. It was dreadful. Porterfield wasn't the only player Brown fell out with. He bought Kelvin Palmer and fell out with him and didn't get him for a while. But Palmer was somehow got himself back in there quite quickly. Porterfield wasn't as lucky as that. So loses a season, but come the they get relegated. Him and Brown meet up in the close season. And it sounds a bit Brian Cloughish, this. They have a discussion, they shake hands, and they agree that Porterfield was in the wrong.
Yeah.
So they step into the following seasons. But he becomes a mainstay in the teams. He's rattling off, 39 games, the 70-71 season, really cementing his place on that left-hand side of the midfield. 71-72, 41 games, 6 goals. He starts chipping in with goals as well. He always had a good, there's loads and loads of match reports where you look where he had a canny shot on him, and he was a lad that would take the chance, and because everybody always expected him to cross the ball, he sometimes used to take a little punt and gallop forward and fire a shot in, and he could do that with, although everybody talks about his left foot, which cliche coming out was like a wand. He could bring the ball forward and give the ball a right good bluter with his right foot. And I've clear memory of him doing that on a number of occasions.
Of course, Kelvin, you say he had a whole career with his wonderful left foot, and he's remembered for one moment on his right foot.
Absolutely. Bizarre. It's bizarre. I find it, really ironic that moment is a right foot moment, for sure.
If I remember rightly, Kelvin, to prove the point almost, he was given a trophy for scoring the winning goal in the final, and it was of a golden boot. And if I remember rightly, he asked that it was made as a left boot because he was that was the one he was better known for.
Yeah, he did. I believe that's a true story. I've read that a few times, and he himself there's a lovely little pamphlet. It's not a book that he produced with John Gibson just after the FA Cup win, called The Impossible Dream. And it's quite an illuminating. It doesn't look much. Chris has got it there. Andrew's showing it there. Yeah. It's there's some lovely little nuggets in there of life as a footballer. It's not. Although the FA Cup is because his career is still. I think he's looking forward at that point when he writes that and thinking, this is me. He's for instance, he was really desperate to play for his country. He really wanted that international.
I was just going to ask that. How didn't he get that? And while you're answering this, Kelvin, because it might be kind of tied in, but you do wonder. You look at Ian Porterfield and you look at his record, and obviously he was kind of stuck around with Sunderland when we went down, and he wasn't involved in that relegation season, but. You do start asking the question, especially when you're talking about a wand of a left foot and the way he played, and coming through with Jim Baxter being touted around some big clubs before he signed Sunderland. You almost start asking the question, why didn't he get that move to a bigger club, and why didn't he get that Scotland cap?
So I think one of the things is, if you look at the era and look at the players who were around, there were every week there were players sort of like him that were rolling in for the opposition teams as well. It was a fantastic era of really skillful, if you want, left-sided midfield players. There were a lot of skillful midfield players around at the time. He was every bit as good as most of them, I would say. A big Ian Porterfield fan. His skills, he had this great way of, it didn't matter how the ball came to him. You absolutely hammer at him from about 10 yards, and he would just bring it down and he'd be off. He had this great way of getting the ball to work for him. The ball always seemed under control with him. And it was always moving. The game was always moving when he was more involved in it. And I mean, you'd probably call him a continuity player, but the ball was always moving. He had a great short ball game. He was really clever at just dead simple short passes, and he never really, somebody said to us, if he played, was he a good dribbler? He played him on the left wing, and I said, well, I hardly ever saw him like take the ball down, dribble and beat a man. What he was really good at was just these 1-2 layoffs, and he just kept the game dead simple. But he was also a box to box. He started the game like he finished it. He rarely looked knackered. He just used to cruise around the pitch. He was a real. I was trying to sneak this into the discussion about Nissan, but he was a real Rolls Royce of a player. He just he started his engine when the game kicked off, and he didn't switch it off until we're finished. Great crosser of the ball.
He was no Nissan Micra, that's for sure.
Hey, he definitely wasn't. He was a Rolls Royce of a player. Lovely mover with the ball. I always, when you're a kid, and I mean, I wasn't a kid by this point. I'd be sort of 12, 13 when I started thinking about what kind of football player am I going to be. And I can remember thinking I really want to be like him. But I actually knew myself that I wasn't that kind of, I didn't move like he moved. He was almost, he was so smooth on the ball. And he played the game, again, another cliche. I always felt he played the game in his own time. It could be absolute madness, people kicking lumps out of each other, and the ball would land at Porterfield, and he'd just bring it under control and sweep a 30-yard pass out to Bobby Kerr on the opposite wing, or just punt Dennis Stewart or Billy Hughes through. The other thing he could do, he had a great. They didn't play too long together, and I was always sorry about this, but him and Tony Towers, they were good together. Them and that threesome, Towers playing up the middle, Kerr and Porter at either side of that midfield. Wow, that was a good midfield. Watching, there was plenty of ammunition for the forwards coming when three were playing together. He would track and defend, but he wasn't a thunderous tackler. Porterfield, he would just nick the ball away, and I always remember in the semi-final against Arsenal, we'd been under the cosh from scoring. And it was heading into half-time, and I mean, we're under an awful lot of pressure. And like the fans were really feeling it, And he just did this thing. He got the ball in the box, and there were two Arsenal players rushing at him. The ball kind of landed at his feet, and he just tapped it, like past them, and just moved around, and it was like just dead simple. But it like totally relieved the pressure, and then he swept the ball up the wing, and Billy Hughes was away running, and Hughesy was scaring the petulias out of, I've lost that lad's name now, that was playing centre half.
Was it Blockley?
Jeff Blockley looked like he was having kittens every time the ball got swept forward. But if you look how often Porter in that game, he had an excellent game that day, and it was All his skills were on show that day, keeping it simple, relieving the pressure. He was just on his gear, on his day. He was a fantastic player to watch.
Sorry,
Yep.
Kelvin. I was just going to say, because we're talking about, obviously, in 1977 when he left,
Yep.
moved to Sheffield Wednesday for that 20,000. I mean, obviously, that's, you're talking 4 years after that brilliant moment at Wembley, and then he'd had mentioned the crash earlier, which impacted him. I mean, again, was this, we asked earlier about Mel Holden, but was this his time to leave, or were
Well,
you? And was there that attachment?
Yeah,
Did it not help?
Yeah, you asked about the Scotland as well. The day before the car crash, we'd beaten Portsmouth 4-1 at home, and I was at that game. I can tell you, if you want to know, if that game had been recorded, I would have said, watch Porterfield that day. He was just head and shoulders ahead of everybody else on the pitch that day. He was brilliant that day, in some of his best football. And the hot rumour was he was going to be in he was going to get a cap. He was going to be in the next Scotland squad. His form that season was, he was probably in the form of his life. And for his position and his age, probably coming into that period, age-wise, 26, 27, where as that kind of player, you can see the big game, all ahead of you. And he has that crash. He breaks his jaw and fractures his skull in that crash. And it takes him a while to get back. When he does get back, I've got to say he wasn't the same player when he came back. And I'm not talking about him not being physically fit. He just seemed to have lost that little bit of something that made him different. He still had moments, but and again, Jimmy Adamson comes into that. Adamson wanted his own players. I mean, when you were talking about Adamson before, I would have said to you that he wasn't a popular choice for manager, and he had a reputation for breeding successful teams, but he would come in and dismantle, and pick the best out of. There's nothing wrong with that if it's really, really needs dismantled. But I think there was a feeling that he was dismantling and tinkering with stuff that some of that stuff didn't need to go, from looking at it from the outside. Porterfield wasn't the same player. He still had a bit of football in him, but he definitely wasn't the same player, for sure. And I guess, in answer to your question, yeah, maybe it was time for him to go. How were things going to change for him?
Yeah. Well, it was only 2 years later, Kelvin, when he moved into management. And just kind of as a final point on Porterfield, because obviously he was successful, did brilliant at Rotherham and Sheffield United. Then took over Aberdeen after Fergie, which was a big move for him. And then obviously got the Chelsea job and was in the dugout playing us in the FA Cup quarter-final in 1992. The last FA Cup win at Roker Park, and he was the opposition manager. Go on, Andrew.
Well, you made the fatal mistake of saying the final point, Chris, because there's still loads we can. Loads we can be saying. I loved the fact that he was involved in that 92 Cup run. Admittedly, as an opposition manager, but that was a lovely little quirk.
It was a bit like Hurley with 73, wasn't it?
Of course, yeah. The two things I was just going to say about Porterfield before we moved on, just one little snippet. You mentioned, Kelvin, the book that Porterfield brought out. Now, this guy at that moment was probably one of the best known footballers in the country. He brings out this book and he prints his address in it. He lived in Harrington at the time, and there it is.
Yeah.
I live in such and such a street and blah, blah, blah. And I just think, come on, just a very different world now.
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
You wouldn't have footballers giving out personal details like that. The other thing I was going to say, the Rolls-Royce analogy. All right, you said there he wasn't quite like a Nissan Micra. Now, as a Nissan owner, I actually don't mind Nissan cars. I think they're all right. But there were Rolls-Royce factories in Sunderland. They weren't making car parts. They were making, I think, aviation parts. Is that right?
Still there.
Is it? Well, there you go.
I've got a mate who works that.
Oh, well, I'm not trying to tell the employees that they're going to be made redundant. I thought it had moved on. Don't panic, lads and lasses. I've not heard any changes on the job front. So yeah, the analogy with Rolls-Royce still holds, even if the analogy with Nissan Micra isn't.
But he was the first, manager to be sacked in the Premiership era as well. He carries that on his CV, unfortunately.
Well, when you look at that, and actually, we played his Reading side in the FA Cup, I think, under Dennis Smith, and they beat us. Actually, I think it was a bit of a shock at the time. I think they were third or fourth division and beat us, knocked us out of the cup as well. But this is one of the questions, Kelvin, and to both of you actually, but put it to you, Kelvin, because you knew his relationship with the club. That you look at the timings when he moved jobs, and he left Aberdeen in '88. I think he got the sack there, just off the top of my head. But that was 1988. So obviously when we're doing well with Dennis Smith. Then I remember he was heavily linked, even though he was with Chelsea at the time. He was heavily linked at the time when we were looking with Malcolm Crosby as caretaker. Even though, and I think because his number one choice was Neil Warnock, I don't think. He was at Chelsea. I think that was difficult. Then he spent all these years, after that we were appointing Mick Buxton until Peter Reid came, and Ian Porterfield's out there all around the world managing, and it just seems like one of these things where it just never seems to line up, Kelvin, and he never managed on.
I don't know what the answer to that is, Chris, really, whether there was ever a time where he was either sought by the club or whether he himself would have been looking to come back. He certainly liked the area and he liked living here. He he
doesn't know what street he was living in, Kelvin. So, yeah.
He liked the area, he liked the people. His family were quite out here.
There isn't.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what happened there. Was there ever really a time where he was going to come back and manage us? He definitely had something. He when you look at the successes that he had, every club just about that he went to, apart from Chelsea, I think, all had there was successes on his CV at just about every club went to, and I think that I wasn't surprised when he started traveling the world for jobs. He's always just a little bit different, a little bit quite a considered lad, thought about the game a lot. If you think about the mistake he made with Brown, I think he was somebody who thought, even as a youngster, that he thought about the game a lot and he had things to say about it. He wasn't just one of these lads that rolled in, played his game and went away home and never thought about it again. He was considered about the game. And so I don't know why. I'd love to know. Maybe that's one to throw out there. Does anybody that's listening to this have anything to say about Porterfield and the opportunity to come and manage Sunderland? I'm not aware of him ever knocking back any offers. I'm not aware of that. And I cannot remember a time where, when we did have vacancies where he was commenting to say, I would love to come and take that job. I would have remembered that because I was definitely a fan and can't recall any of that. So I don't know what the answer
I'm
to
not
it
aware
is.
of any links.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
He was definitely on the shortlist when Dennis Smith left.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
He was on the shortlist then.
Yeah.
But I don't, it was one of these things where he was probably talked about. But
Yeah.
I wonder, and you could say this about Clough as well, perhaps it's a good thing, because if somebody, we're talking about two absolutely adored characters in our history. Sometimes they come back as a manager and it doesn't work out, and that can change your legacy. And that would be a horrible shame for Porterfield.
It would.
So maybe whilst it makes a nice little link in the newspaper to fill a few column inches, perhaps it was for the best.
Yeah.
He's another lad that dies very young. He passed away when he was 61. He'd cancer of the colon, and typical of him, even after his diagnosis, he continued working. He was the national manager of the Armenian national team and continued working, but passed away, sadly, fairly. But just another, God, you think I'll say this every week, but I am blessed to have seen that lad tread around our park. Absolutely blessed. He was a lovely player to watch.
Yeah, and absolutely fantastic to hear about it, Kelvin. Yeah, it's always at this stage, still got a day to go. And it's this, before we record, I say, I'm looking at the list thinking, well, we'll not talk that much about some of these. This might be like a quick hour or, just over an hour. And then here we are over 2 hours. And I tell you what, you just blink and 2 hours just disappears. But right, and because we need to get into, again, July 26th, it's our last kind of deep dive, 1983, the year I was born and the day I was born. But unfortunately, it was the death of Eddie Burbanks. So he scored in the 1937 FA Cup final, and he passed away at the age of 70, Andrew.
Yeah. Brilliant day for you, Chris, but sad day for the for the Burbanks family. I did want to mention it though, and I think it's important that we remember Eddie Burbanks, even though it was an unfortunate date for him, because the other two scorers in the cup final, Bobby Gurney and Raish Carter, they get a lot of attention still. They're very well remembered now. I get that. I fully get that. We're talking about two local lads, joint top scorers when we won the title in 36. Very good friends, from what I gather, the pair of them.
One was captain.
Yeah. Two of our best players. So I can see why those two are still spoken about and revered. But Burbanks, I think, deserves to be seen as a legend as well. So yeah, although it's sad to remember somebody passing away, I just wanted to touch on Burbanks' career and give a nod to him. When we signed him in 1935, he was still playing amateur football. His day job was as a clerk for Doncaster Corporation. We've spoken in the past about footballers back in the day. They would have day jobs and they'd play on an amateur basis. But we signed him in 1935 and made him a professional. Couple of months after that, towards the end of that season, he made his debut in another 4-1 win over Portsmouth, like Kelvin, the one you touched upon, where Ian Porterfield was at his best. He had his debut, he scored. But the following season, when we won the title, outside left was another absolute legend of the club, Jimmy Connor. So he spent a whole season as an understudy. Didn't get a look in as we won the title. It was only when Connor gets injured the following season that Burbanks gets a proper run in the team. He scores in the Charity Shield. That was actually played in October, not at the start of the season. It was played during the season. He scores in that as we win that against Arsenal at Roker. He plays in the cup run 6 times, and in the final itself, he has a major role because not only does he score, but it's his corner that leads to our equaliser. Just after half-time, we were 1-0 down to Preston in the cup final in 1937, but he helps us get level when Gurney scores. Carter then puts us ahead, and with about 15 minutes left, he scores a crucial goal. It's like a really well-hit, powerful shot low into the net. But with 15 minutes left in the cup final, if you're only 2-1 up, there's no guarantee you go on and win that. So Burbanks scoring to make it 3-1 was a huge step for us, because that was the first time we'd won the cup. We'd been in it for so long, and we'd been trying to win it, and there was a whole load of near but not near enough types of stories. So Burbanks, yeah, for that alone, was a big name. Do you know the name Kelvin? Was he? And it was a long time before you started watching, but I dare say in the 60s he was still a much loved figure amongst fans.
Some of the worthies on the bus who I love to pick their brains, they would talk about that 37 team. Jimmy Connor was a very, very good player, according to them. A key factor in the team. But Burbanks coming in wasn't a weakness. It didn't weaken him at all. They thought they had a very good young player. They talk with great fondness about that, about the whole team. Obviously, they remember the 37 final in the same way that we would remember I remember the 73 final. So great fondness for the team, but also these players that might have been on the periphery at the time, but who came and did really good jobs. But am I not right in thinking when he comes in, he stays in?
He does. Once he's then become a regular, he remains first choice. But we've spoken a lot about Porterfield today. Burbanks, Porterfield, that's 2 of the 4 players who scored in a winning FA Cup final for Sunderland. Yeah. But yes, after the cup run, you're right, Kelvin, he remains first choice in the team. He actually scored our final goal before World War II. But it doesn't count. It gets expunged from the records because those games early on in that season get kind of announced null and void. During the war, he serves in the RAF, but he does come back to Sunderland. Had the war not happened, I think he would have had considerably more games for us. We've spoken before about lads who've had years of their careers robbed by the war. But in 1945-46, when things get back to normal, he's a big part of the team. There's only one other player makes more appearances than him that season. And it's in 1948 when he leaves Sunderland. He moves to Hull, and it's my time to put you 2 on the spot, because have you got any guesses for who signed him for Hull?
Rich Carter.
Yes, well done, chaps. It was his former teammate, Rich Carter, that signed him in 48 for Hull. At Hull, he was just as equally popular. From what I can gather, he was a main part of their promotion into the second tier towards the end of that decade. He was there for a long time. He played a lot of games for them. Before retiring, he did have a short spell with Leeds, but he still lived in Hull. Like I say, very popular fella. He quit playing in 1954, and then up until 1979 in East Hull, he ran a sweet shop. Now that might be another reason why he's popular. All the young lads remember going to buy the kets off a former professional footballer. But yeah, he sells up the business in late 1979. Unfortunately, he only has a few years in full retirement because in 1983, as was said, whilst the Wynn family is celebrating the arrival of our Chris there.
I wouldn't say celebrating.
Oh, I'm sure there were. But, you know. Well, we're celebrating it now, Chris. But yeah, yeah. He passed away aged 70. He was still living in Hull at the time. He passed away in his house. And interestingly, he was born in Yorkshire. He passed away in Yorkshire. That house where he sadly died was actually on Boothferry Road, which is where Hull City's ground was and where he'd played for a long time. So he's very fondly thought of at Hull, very fondly thought of at Sunderland, and I'm pleased that we've been able to just give him a couple of minutes, given his source.
Yeah, well,
Absolutely.
just apologies if you did say this part, Andrew, but you mentioned that goal just before war broke out. That last goal. Well, when the official league started back up again in 1946-47, after the war league years, opening day of the season, we played Derby County. Eddie Burbanks pops up, gets the first goal after 10 minutes, penalty.
Wow.
And who is in that Derby County side?
His soon-to-be manager, I believe.
Rich Carter.
Yeah.
So there you go.
He must have played with Don Revy as well then at Tull, did he?
Oh,
I wonder if he did. Yeah.
Well, maybe, and then going on to Leeds.
Yeah.
So there's links there.
There you go. Yeah.
But yeah, it's it. I mean that's a
Wow.
that's a proper quiz question. That I mean, who scored the last goal and first goal? Before and after World War II broke out. So
I'm going to see how many times I can drop that into conversation this week.
I was going to say, I tell you what, it'll be amazing walking around. If you'll know people that might have actually listened to the pod if they're going, "Hey, I've got a question for you."
Yeah, I've got one. Yeah. But you don't know this.
In my memory, I'll still forget the answer. So
someone will ask us and go, "No, I've never heard that one before." But yeah,
good
brilliant.
one. That I love hearing about those players from bygone eras. I love all that. I love to listen to all that.
Good shout, brilliant, Andrew. Good stuff. Well, let's move on because again, let's finish off the 26th of July because we mentioned Julio Arca signed for Sunderland a couple of days prior. Well, in 2006, Julio Arca went to Middlesbrough for 1.75 million. And actually, when you look back at his career, as we did in the fullbacks and kind of our foreign imports, it's amazing how he stayed for so long when you think about it. But moving on, talking about fullbacks, moving on to July the 26th, 2007, quite an interesting one that Martin wrote about on the site on this day. On this day, Leighton Baines turned us down. He was due to pretty much sign for us. We had a 6 million bid accepted. He was about to sign for the club. Roy Keane had his man, but then Everton came in, and after that, his head was turned, and that was that. But apparently, like I said, he changed his mind on this day in 2007. But
he would have been a smashing player for us. He was a good player.
He would have been a good player. I honestly thought you said Leighton James. And it was only when you said £6 million, I thought, hang on, there's something wrong there. But yes, Leighton Baines, I remember us being desperate to sign him. I think he would have been a good buy for us had it happened.
Yeah, no, it was a brilliant piece, Andrew. Martin wrote, on the site, looking back at the news articles, clippings of that day, and it said we were out looking for a left back. We tried to get Leighton Baines in, didn't quite work, and we got that desperate. We ended up with Ian Hart at the time, bringing him in. But there you go. So that was one for 2007. 2009, on July 26th, our last one for today, we beat Atletico Madrid in the Amsterdam tournament 2-0, 2 goals from Kieran Richardson. And our final day was July the 27th. And we go to 1982. Midfielder Ian Atkins signed from Shrewsbury Town, with striker Alan Brown moving in the opposite direction. 1991, Ruben Agboola helped Nigeria qualify for the African Nations Cup final as they beat Burkina Faso 7-1. 2000, Slovakian international captain Stanislav Varga signed from Slovan Bratislava for 650,000. You can hear us debate how good Stan Varga was on the central defenders top 10 that we did, which was all good fun. 2006, Niall Quinn and his Drummerville Group Consortium finally formally complete their takeover of Sunderland. So that might have happened a little earlier. I'm not quite sure. Because he appointed manager on the 25th. So it might have officially went through. I'm not quite sure, Andrew.
Yeah, I think everything was agreed, but then there was a legal process because there were so many various shareholders dotted around that needed to be contacted. So it was all done and dusted in a sense, but it needed to be officially rubber stamped. That's my memory of it.
That would make sense. It would make sense. 2013, we were beaten. We talked about beating Spurs. That was a semi-final of the Premier League Asia Cup final, the trophy. Sorry, this was the final on the 27th in 2013. But we got beat by Manchester City 1-0 in the final in Hong Kong. Edin Dzeko, I think, got the winner there. 2018, what a wonderful summer that was. Looking forward to League One. How happy we were that summer. And this was on this day on 27th in 2018. It was bizarrely the last friendly before we were due to get going against Charlton. We travelled down to Middlesbrough because they were a huge club in the Championship, obviously, and we were ready for League One. And it got abandoned at half-time because of a thunderstorm, which was just typical of us at the time. Last game before League One, and there you go. And 2019, another sad time, which we're not going to dwell on too much because this was just weeks after our playoff final defeat against Charlton, and we play supposedly a high-profile friendly at the Stadium of Light against Dutch side Heerenveen, and we were beaten 1-0 in front of around 6,000 fans at the Stadium of Light. I mean, that period of 2018-29 just isn't worth talking about all that much. So we finished our days, and that means only one thing, Andrew. Get into next week's quiz question.
Yes. I'm looking at my Sunderland FC calendar on the wall, which has a picture of Alan Brown at present, and that tells me that we will be covering week 28th of July to the 3rd of August.
I will take your word for it, Andrew. Yeah. I haven't looked that far ahead yet.
Don't take my word for it. Take Alan Brown's word for it.
Right,
if you've got any problems, take it up with him. Now, this player, our mystery player for the quiz this week, had his testimonial during the period 28th of July to the 3rd of August. I'll not say the year or the opposition, because I think that would give things away. But this person was a much-loved character. We've definitely mentioned him in this pod in the past. Started 375 games for us, scored 27 goals, and I think if I put my mind to it, I'd probably be able to remember those goals. Middle name of this player is Anthony, and his son was on our books for a while also. So I've gone a little bit less route one with some of those clues, but he's a player and a figure that I think we'll enjoy talking about next time, boys.
There you go. I think I might have potentially mentioned a game he's famous for in this one, if I'm thinking right, or maybe not. Anyway, well, I'm gonna.
I can't even remember that either. I can't even remember the conversation.
I'm gonna have to have a think about it now, make sure I'm right before I say anything else. But on that note, that ends our quick hour that we always have. That we aim to have, and then we just go off and, like I said, gather around the campfire and go off on our sometimes wonderful tangents that mean something and some that are total waffle. But like I said, hopefully it's never boring. But that just leaves me to say, Andrew, thank you very much again. Always a pleasure, mate.
Yes, thank you. Excellent job, Chris. And if you want waffle about Sunderland, I'm your man.
Well, that's it. We could probably, if we had the time, would be here for about 6 hours, I reckon. And Kelvin, I want to say thank you very much because once again, absolutely brilliant talking about those characters.
It's a treat, lads. And if you want waffle about Sunderland, Andrew's your man.
Oh, I was just going to say, Kelvin, I was just going to say, I love hearing your stories, but I'm not going to bother now. I'm going to just zip it now and leave it at that.
Well, anyway, and Martin should be back next week, so he'll be keeping a tighter rein on us all waffling too much or whatever, and he can do the panicking that we've gone on too long or whatever. But thank you very much again, gentlemen. Much appreciated. And of course, thank you again, everyone, for listening. Honestly, the feedback that we had on the Brive Clough discussion was absolutely fantastic. Please, if we've mentioned something that's complete rubbish and we've got it all wrong, please tell us. We just want any sort of feedback, because we just love hearing about Sunderland. Whether we want to be, if we're wrong, we want to be corrected. And if you've just enjoyed it, just let us know, because it's all absolutely fantastic here, and it was great to get all those messages about great Brian Clough as well. So we do hope you're enjoying listening to these. Of course, look out on the Roker Report website for everything that's happening SAFC related during the summer. We've got everything from this sort of stuff, talking about the past. We've got top 10s, we've got news roundups of the latest ones, we've got news, we've got everything on How We're the Podcast, and obviously on the website itself. But thanks again for listening today. But from us, bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized, so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 350 plus programs at asuonline.asu.edu.